Hey everybody, welcome to GMG Review. Today we're taking a look at Void Cowboys by Corey Sullivan. This is another Blacksite Studio micro game and is designed basically for a single player where a salvager is attempting to hunt deep space for like bits and pieces and to repair stuff. You can play it with one or more players, but together you'll form a crew. There is like some narrative element, and this short form sort of like micro game allows you to kind of experience the terrors of outer space, a bit like a movie like Gravity or Ad Astra, where you have to manage resources. So it's a 32 mil game on a 32 mil base. You have to keep track of oxygen on your dashboard, as well as exertion and some other things. Now your dashboard is back here, this little guy that you can download. So you've also got your stats and stuff. Each salvager begins with 10 oxygen tokens, it's like your supply. And then it will also safeguard against duress in the void, so like your pressure basically on you. Every salvager has a set amount of exertion slots on their dashboard. These are kind of your action points, and then use them to interact with the objects in the vacuum. You can carry an amount of bulk, which is how much stuff you're basically able to lug around. It's the number of salvage tokens you can carry. By default, it's 2, and everyone has a set of focus skills that allow them to perform under pressure and provide bonuses towards specific tests. Each model token and even some elements of scenery in the game can obtain a velocity, which is the value that governs passive movement. So like you always move a little bit because you have inertia because you're in a vacuum and there's no gravity. Salvagers perform compulsory movement at the beginning of their activation per their velocity, whereas environmental objects like beacons, salvage, and scenery move passively at the end of the phase. So it's a little bit like the Gorka Morka rolling road, where you can kind of boost around, but the other stuff's going to move during the turn in relationship to you. So what do you need to play? You need a salvager, you need a dashboard, you need a velocity widget, and then 3 6-sided dice to track exertion, 1 8-sided dice to track your velocity, and a method for keeping track of your oxygen. So 10 counters, a 10-sided dice, etc. And the table needs to be approximately 3 by 3, referred to in-game as the claim site, 20-sided die, measuring stick, scatter puck. So a scatter puck could just be like a D10 where the point goes up. A barge marker, a universal salvage beacon times 7, 5 tech salvage beacons, 3 high value salvage beacons, 12 salvage tokens. And this is just the junk floating around in space. And then 15 pieces of scenery like asteroids, ship debris, 5 small size pieces of scenery, 5 medium sized pieces of scenery, and 5 large size pieces of scenery. So the goal there would be like, imagine if you've ever played the third Dead Space game, imagine like the wreckage around the planet. That's kind of what I'm envisioning. Like I actually have an Isaac Clarke miniature I'm probably just gonna use for this and make like the SCAF fleet basically destroyed around the planet. And then so setup, you set up a game of Void Cowboys. Each player collects their personal components and forms their crew. You roll for contracts, roll for scenery placement, roll for the salvager deployment, roll for environmental hazards, and then you start. So first thing, a game of Void Cowboys is split over a set number of game rounds. The duration value is usually 10 minus number of participating players. So the more people on the table, the less time you have to do the objectives. You have a Salvager Phase, which is when you get to do your stuff, an environmental phase where the stuff on the table will move around. At the beginning of the game, you roll a d20, and the player who rolled the highest value activates first. The player is given the first player marker. If you're playing it by yourself, it's irrelevant. A player that's in the process of activating their salvager is referred to as being the active player. During the Salvager Phase, the player takes turn activating their salvager, after which you go clockwise. So the beginning of the first player's turn, check the contract. If the contract's fulfillment parameters are complete, then the job's a success. This is like, did you find the stuff you need to find to win the game? And if the contract's fulfillment parameters are incomplete and the duration is 0, then you failed. The game immediately ends, and the crew only gain credits granted from opening salvage beacons. No other payouts or experience are granted from the postgame because you don't get paid by your employer. You're basically not getting anything from it. So then you activate. So at the beginning of a player's turn, you place a d6, which is your exertion die, showing a value of the player's choice on an empty exertion slot when you activate your salvager. When a salvager is activated, they first make a compulsory move in the direction travel is equal to their velocity. So they have to make your, like, it's a bit like Battlefield Gothic, you have to make your straight ahead move or your velocity move in the direction you are moving. After performing their compulsory move, the salvager generates a number of AP based on the value of their exertion die used to activate. So your exertion dice basically, you can do more actions up to 6, or action points up to 6, but it's harder to get rid of action dice later on. They can spend those AP to perform any number of actions, provided they're able to pay for them. Salvagers may alternatively spend their AP on abilities listed on their tools, gear, and items. So like if you have a cool piece of gear like a welder or a cutter or something like that, you can spend AP on that. After the salvagers expended their generated AP, they can opt to drop any tokens on their dashboard, placing the dropped tokens within 1 inch of the salvager, and setting those tokens' velocity to match the salvager. Drop tokens have the same direction of travel as the salvager that dropped them. So when you're basically, things move you're facing, and if you need to get stuff back to your barge, you can be moving towards it, drop all those pieces, and they will just slowly move towards the barge with inertia. So there's some neat tricks in kind of like dropping stuff and having it drift away from you. After salvagers expend their, oh, so that's the drop thing. If a salvager moves outside the claim site for any reason, their activation immediately ends. Place them anywhere within 2 of the edge that they exited from, and then they lose 2 oxygen, because they basically have to like spend oxygen turning around and coming back. And then duress. At the beginning of a player's turn, the salvager has no more exertion slots on their dashboard. The salvager must perform a stress check to clear their exertion slots. For a salvager to perform a stress check, the salvager's controller rolls a d20 and compares the total value of all the dice on their exertion slots. So like if you do 6, 6, 6 for your action points, you're gonna have to roll like a 19, 20 to beat that number of exertion. The value is less than the sum of it. They must spend oxygen from the reserve equal to the difference. If the salvager does not have enough oxygen to meet their exertion, then they spend all the remaining oxygen, clear their exertion dice, and are now under duress. Basically, you're like, you need to go home because you're out of gas. While under duress, a salvager can only have exertion dice that have a value of 1 placed in an empty activation slot, and they may consistently only generate to 1 AP per activation. Replenishing any amount of oxygen cancels duress, so if you get any of your oxygen back. So then tests. Salvagers will often be required to pass tests to obtain hard-to-win salvage and avoid obstacles and stuff. It's a d20, and you compare the rolled value to the test plus like your test value for whatever the TN is, and your salvager's current velocity. The value rolled equals or exceeds the value of the test, and the salvager succeeds in the test. So like, if you have a focus skill that can be applied towards it, so like your physical, so you can see there's all these different physical traits that you can have. Right, so you have your phys, your intelligence, your dexterity, and those things will be the things you test against. A salvager can only apply a focus skill to a test if they have at least 1 exertion die on their dashboard. For each exertion die on the salvager's dashboard, with the value of focus skills threshold or less, add the focus skill to the value of the test roll. So you get your bonus if you have an exertion die down. For example, an active salvager is required to pass a Phys 13 test and has a Phys focus skill of 4, with the bonus being +1. The active salvager has 2 exertion dice in the dashboard, one with a value of 4 and one with 3. Because both those exertion dice are less than the Phys focus skill, they get +2 to the total test. So for every dice you have down that isn't higher than your attribute there, if you blow dice higher than it, you don't get the bonus because you basically overexerted yourself. Then you get the bonus for each one of those dice. On a natural 12, after adding the focus skill, their roll is brought up to a 14, making it a success. If a test has multiple bonuses of different test options, then the affected player is free to pick which one. So like if you could do it with physical intelligence or dexterity, you just pick your best action. And there's your actions. So move, you activate the salvager's velocity, and you can increase or decrease by 2. So it's a little bit like, not Battlefield Gothic, Aeronautic Imperialis, where you can like up or down your speed to try and make yourself move better. And then you go your velocity widget to travel the direction that you're gonna go, and you move that many inches. Interact for 2, you can interact with like universal beacons, tech beacons, or high value beacons. They can use any stat, but they have different like levels. So like it's harder to interact with a universal beacon with Phys, but intelligence or dex will do it better. Actually, it's harder for everything almost with Phys except for high value beacon. It's hardest for intelligence on that one. Dexterity is the lowest. And then tech beacons are also higher for Phys. Once a salvager succeeds in opening a salvage beacon, roll in the scenario's corresponding salvage chart to see what you found. So it's like a little Cracker Jack box. And then surplus salvage tokens that are not collected, scatter 2 away from the salvager with a velocity of 2. So when you open it, it just stuff flies out. And you might have to like go chase it down to find it if you can't carry it out, because you only carry 2 things. After identifying the contents of the beacon, remove it from the table, but the stuff stays and will move at velocity in the direction that it scatters. Any salvager may interact with a salvage token to add it to their dashboard if they have any available bulk. And they have to pay the interact to do it, right? Replenish for 1, a salvager within 0.5 of a barge can replenish up to 3 oxygen. So you can go back. Again, it feels kind of Dead Spacey. You can find little oxygen tanks and like pull oxygen back on. And then shove for 1 AP. If an active salvager is within 5 of a salvage token beacon or another salvager, they can push them 2 inches directly away, which changes their directly away from the active salvager, decrease the salvagers and increase the shoved entity's velocity by 2. So when he shoves, his velocity goes down, like the active players, and the object they're shoving goes up by 2, but it moves in the direction he wants when he shoves it. And there's rules for collisions. And then you get your contract. So like a mining operation, you're rolling a d20. On 1 day, it's a mining operation. Have 5 salvage tokens within an inch of the barge, trying to shove stuff over there. On a 9 to 14, a decommissioned satellite array, have 6 salvage tokens within 1 inch of the barge, but the beacons will be different and harder. And then an unclaimed derelict, an actual ship, have 7 salvage tokens within 1 inch of the barge. And then scenery, so like rules for scattered debris, asteroid clusters, large wrecks, and fractured stations. So like what the terrain might be like when you roll your d20. Deployment, you have different deployment sites like a carpool. Each player places their salvager within 4 of the barge and 2 inches away from each other, and they have a velocity of 0. A wide formation, the crew chooses an edge of the claim site. Each player puts themselves within 4 of that edge and 2 away from another salvager. And you start with a velocity of 2, and then like last minute shift. They basically just make it slightly more difficult or a different vector to come on. Then you get your hazards. So for introductory game, select Calm in the Void, but it could be a bad day, roll twice in the hazards table, or like a debris storm, stuff's flying in. It gets very, like, the beginning of gravity very fast. But unstable gravity could reduce your focus threshold by 1. So like, if the threshold is 4, it goes down to 3, so you can't exert as much to get your bonuses. Leaking tanks, everybody loses an oxygen each game, and then irradiated claim site. When tallying exertion dice results for stress checks, increase the result by 1 each. So if you do 3, it counts as 4 at the end for your stress check. And then salvage tables, like what do you find? And then building your salvager. So this is the rules for making your guys. Your salvager starts with maximum oxygen, so 10. And then you get your upgrade slots, which are things you can find later on when you do campaigns. You get your exertion slots, so these 1, 2, 3 right here to put dice on. Your salvager's focus skill threshold, so down here. Your salvager's focus skill bonuses, so like the bonuses they would add. A starting salvager, each player takes a blank dashboard and grants the salvager 15 CR and 1 experience, which can be immediately spent to improve your salvager. Assign the values 2, 3, and 4 amongst the dashboard's blank focus, and 1 value in each threshold, the larger the better. Credits can be used to purchase tools, gear, and items from the shop. A salvager can only take a number of tools, gears, or items into the field based on their limits, like how many slots you have. And then a player may spend experience to upgrade the salvager by filling in upgrade slots. With filled in upgrade slots conferring the permanent boost that are associated with that scat. So fill in an upgrade slot, spend the amount of XP equal to the total amount of the upgrade slots in the dashboard that are already filled plus 1. So it starts at 1 if you want to do 1 slot, 2 if you want to do 2 slots. Like you start at Fizz plus 1 and you're going to have a 2, 3, and a 4 in here. If you're Fizz plus 1, it would be 2 experience to make it plus 2, or sorry, it would be 1 to do the first one and then 2 to do the second one as your experience points. And you can spend your first experience point right away to increase one of these stat lines. And then post-game. So after job concludes, it's time for a payout. If the job was a success, the crew gains 5 CR per salvage token within one of the barge at the end of the job. This total CR amount is split as evenly as possible amongst all the salvagers in the crew. Each salvager gains an experience. If the job completed during the duration elapsed, note that the value of the remaining duration in each salvager gains is X, XP, XCR, and X whatever. So these are the things you could find, like a certification you could buy for 20 credits. It gives you plus 1 experience. You could buy an e-tool for plus 1 intelligence during tests. A heat patch, used automatically to pass a stress check. A zip tether, use 1 use, 2 AP attached to another salvager. Salvage token within 1 inch of the salvager. At the beginning of the environmental phase, place the attached object within 1 inch of the barge. Basically, you just like zip tie something to yourself. A Weevil scanner, use once so the salvager would roll on the table to determine the contents of a salvage beacon. You can just choose instead for 35. Salvage rigging, you just get plus 1 bulk and carry 3 things instead of 2. So what we've got here basically is a non-combat game of like space salvage operations. I love, and it's like a zine, like it's a zine game, right? You can grab all the game resources here and join the Discord to like talk more about it. So it's written by Corey and then designed done by Ben. And this little 16-page game is a perfect add-on to sci-fi campaign games. Even if you aren't going to make a dedicated game for this, imagine you're playing something like Stargrave, and you want to have like something happen in between your campaign turns that has to do with the ship. You could just take your characters from Stargrave, stat them up in here, and then have some kind of space accident require them to repair something and have this little mini campaign thing ready to go. I love little games like this that are just purpose-built for a theme. They're perfect for narrative gaming in what you want them to do. The same way that like Malev's Demon Ship is perfect for like an escape basically of like a single character in a campaign. These are such great little additions to the Black Site like lexicon, and also because they don't, you're basically going to repurpose stuff that you have. You can obviously buy the Black Site miniatures too, but you can repurpose stuff that you have or include the game itself as a micro game inside your other campaigns. These are such a great novelty to me. I love that this is becoming more prevalent. I think Malev really kicked off the idea of these little 16-page micro games with Demon Ship, and we're seeing more and more of them as we go forward. So this is available. I believe Corey had this at Adepticon. I don't know if it's available for sale at the Black Site booth right now. If it is, go there this week and check it out. I'm sure it'll be out soon on the actual Blacksite Studios site. So it's not available right now, to my knowledge. I didn't see it on the website, but get excited for it. I love these little games. They only cost a couple bucks, and you have like this kind of pre-made thing to add to like a narrative campaign in space. So I hope they keep making these and doing more of these. And this is the kind of like delightful kind of game design that I'm here for when it comes to the current like state of miniature wargaming. So good job, Corey. Good job, Ben. The layout is slick. Like I like the like kind of, it almost has like an 80s feel to it. Like he picked a theme and really like ran with it, and it looks really good. It's very simple, but it's also really like just nice. It's printed in like a heavy zine card, like it's not cardstock, but just like a thick gauge paper. So the quality's really good, just staple bound. But like I said, for a couple bucks, you have this neat little kind of like co-op game that you can play with your friends and can add into like a narrative campaign mission. I'm all here for it. So check it out when it comes out. What I would do is just go on the BSS Discord or check out their website and add yourself to the mailing list, and you'll get more news when more of these things come out. Because they had a whole bunch of stuff like this at ADEPTICON this year, and Corey got my hands on this one. So big thanks for watching. Big thanks for Corey for giving me this so I could check it out. Till next time, I'm Ash. Have a good night.